So you want to start a campaign? Fair enough. It is lots of fun. I really enjoy being a DM and a player. Luckily, I'm in a position where I get to do both a lot of the time, and oftentimes players make really good DMs and DMs make really good players. We gotta try our hand at everything. I know that trying to DM for the very first time can honestly be incredibly intimidating, especially if you're going to be DMing your normal dungeon master. The tips that I'm including in this video sometimes are for people who are DMing for the very first time, and also some people who have been DMing for a long time but want to see if some of these things can be integrated into their games. Also, some of these tips are specifically tailored towards people who are going to be dungeon mastering actual players. If you don't know what an actual play is, that's kind of what I do. It's the people who stream their Dungeons & Dragons games, whether it's through podcast form, on Twitch, on YouTube, those types of things. Because when it comes to DMing for those things, it is an entirely different ballgame. But first, let's lay out how a dungeon master needs to act differently in a game with their friends versus in an actual play. The main reason being, there is an audience. Compared to when you're just playing with your friends, you are creating a product that is going to be watched by people. In that way, there's a kind of unspoken layer of professionalism that needs to occur throughout the entire process. In that way, prep is everything. But when you're playing with your friends, most of the time you guys can make mistakes, take a long time in combat, and R a lot of the time, and you'll be totally fine. Also, you can use a lot of in-jokes that you might not necessarily be able to do in an actual play setting because not everyone's going to get what you're talking about. On to prep. As part of my DM style, I am a slut for preparation. But you have to make sure you do a lot of prep without taking away from the improvised aspects of the game. You still need surprises. The reason I care about prep so much is it is a really surefire way to make your players care about the game and the world that they're playing in. For actual players, this is especially good as if you give them a lot riding on it and they've already put so much work into something, they're probably not going to cancel last minute. You give them stakes. Throughout this, I'm going to be using my current actual play game, Dungeons & Demigods, as an example. This is a campaign, Dungeons & Dragons 5th E, inspired by Percy Jackson, that we play on Twitch live. It is not pre-recorded. I was really, really lucky with this campaign that I got multiple months of prep time because we had to wait until someone got back to their own country. And because of that, I was able to do all of the things that I could ever hope to do to get a really well-rounded start before we even had our first session. Speaking about before our first session, let's discuss a little bit about Session 0. Session 0, if you don't know, is the session of planning and discussion that occurs before you even pick up your dice. Most of the time this is used to reinstate safety tools, discuss what people want out of the campaign, maybe make some character connections, develop your character to begin with. It is a super vital part of Dungeons & Dragons to make sure that everyone's having a really great time. So I'm going to take you through step by step how I run my Session Zeros. My Session Zeros are long. Being able to run through everything verbally rather than through text or writing up really complicated backstories is really good for my little ADHD brain. I much prefer it. Most of the time when it comes to my players, I end up doing a massive Session 0 and then occasionally hopping on a Discord call with them individually where we can just word vomit and brainstorm what they're going to do with their character. The first thing that we do in a Session 0 is start off with our safety discussion. Most of the time before I even start at Session 0, I have all of my players fill out the safety consent form. I will link it below, but essentially it just makes people list all of their various triggers to a red, yellow, or green, whether they're totally okay with it being explored in detail, they're okay with it being mentioned but not implicitly described, or they don't want to see it at all. By sending this to me, I already know what lines have been drawn in the sand. So usually I will start off with a master list, including everything that people have said red, yellow, and green for. Not by name, I just put them in a massive list all together. I then read through it. If anyone has any points or clarifications they want to make, we can have a discussion about that. Then most of the time I will discuss any kind of heavier topics that I want to explore in this campaign. I'll give some examples of how they may come up, just so the players understand what they might be signing up for. And if someone is not okay with a certain topic, we can talk about whether this is a complete line or how in depth they're able to go into this, and have those in-person discussions to make sure everyone feels safe at the table and everyone is aware of each other's no-goes. Then I organise this into a document that the players can always have access to, We use, well, at least I use, lines and veils system. Lines are never to be mentioned. Veils are things that can be maybe mentioned but not implicitly described, and anything that's in the green section is stuff that everyone's okay with. Then I'll usually go through a little discussion about what to expect at my table. I don't like to lay out rules or anything because sometimes it can feel a little bit like, but most of the time I just explain what I want to give to them and what I kind of ask of them. And also this gives an open discussion where people can start talking about certain accessibility needs that they may require. For example, for me, I have ADHD. That just means sometimes I might accidentally interrupt people or go on a tangent and not notice that someone is raising their hand. And one of the things that I mentioned in session zeros is, hey guys, I might interrupt you. Please interrupt me back and say that you were talking and keep going. I know in the moment it might seem rude that you are calling me out on that, but for me personally, I much prefer knowing in the moment. Otherwise, I watch it back later and feel this intense amount of guilt and embarrassment over it. So I'd rather you point it out in the moment, and then I can learn and we can all have a good time and I don't feel super guilty. And it also means that maybe if I interrupt someone, they know that it's because of a disability that they have. Maybe it's something that I can't control. Because I've brought it up, they know that I don't just hate them and want them to stop talking. And it means that I know that they know, so I don't think that they hate me or something, or that I'm being really rude. I promise it's not my fault. But with these kinds of little techniques set up, and we also get a system, it means that I can feel like I'm doing my absolute best to keep those things under control, but I also know that my players are aware it might happen and that they're going to be able to fix it, so I don't feel super guilty. But these kinds of discussions are especially important if you are doing an actual play. Just means talking about making sure that you aren't talking about a lot of in-jokes that the audience might not get. The fact that we want to make sure that we aren't taking a super long time during combat, coming up with some techniques about how we can make it really interesting for people to watch, making sure that we show up on time and how much advance we should give the rest of the group if we're not going to be able to make it that week, what we are going to do in a situation where someone can't make it that week, that kind of stuff. Basically getting the hard conversations out of the way so we can do the creative stuff. Once all of the serious shit is out of the way, that's when we can get into the fun stuff, which is the second part of a session zero, which is the world building section. I've always found as soon as players are able to get their hands on the world and build their own small corner of it or participate in that creation process, they are far more, it makes them genuinely care about this campaign and the world that they're in. And it also creates a really cool collaboration between you as the DM and your players. Specifically when I was doing the Percy Jackson campaign, they were all going to be from a singular place, which definitely helped. So when we had our session zero, I had a list of questions that I was going to ask them and just started shouting out some stuff and got them to answer questions, and we built this world together. For example, who is the bully at camp? Who is the one that gives everyone a hard time? And someone shouts out, what a godly parent they have, and then someone comes up with a name, and then someone comes up with a random piece of lore, for example, that's how I came up with Cressida. Cressida is a child of Apollo, and she uses a crossbow, and she's part of the main big three of really cool heroes at camp. A fun example of that is when I did a Monster Hearts campaign, and we came up with a kid who is the drug dealer at the school, and his name is Shit Dave because there was another guy a few years ahead who was called Dave, who was a drug dealer, and Shit Dave had the worst stuff, but since he's graduated, the real Dave, but he's still known as Shit Dave and no one knows his real name. That was just come up with in a session zero. It's funny shit like that. Or I might ask, if there is a couple, where do they go on the island? What is the make-out location? If people want something from the outside world, who's the person that they go to? And if someone comes up with a child of Hermes, then there might be a player character who's also a child of Hermes, and they go, oh cool, they're younger than me, we probably have a relationship. And they're able to build on that. By doing these kinds of activities, it gets the players into understanding what this world is and also connects them to it because they were part of the creation process. Then, depending on the campaign, you might have people introduce their characters to the group, but if it's going to be kind of a everyone's at a tavern, so they're not meant to know that much about each other, you might keep it to yourself. If you are a new DM and you struggle to sometimes get your players to talk to each other, I always recommend that you have some of them know each other beforehand and get some pre-established connections. Don't have every single one in the party have connections to each other, because that just takes away from a lot of the stuff that you'll see at the table, but have 2 of your players be siblings or enemies. They work together in a job one time. Little things like that. So those 2 players have something they can talk about, which helps with the rest of the party's dynamics. But if someone wants to be a bit of a loner, make sure you give them NPC connections. They have to have someone on their list that they can know, so you can pop them in front of them and they immediately have someone to talk to or about. Establishing connections and establishing a connection to the world that they are in always gives your players something to talk about and something for you to throw at them. Another thing that I sometimes do, if I have enough time, is I'll write up a list of questions that the players can ask themselves about their character. They don't necessarily have to write them down and send it back to you. In fact, I don't even ask them to. I just ask that they read through it, and if an answer comes up in their mind, they've done the character building, well done. You've done the thing, good job. For example, Percy Jackson, what does ambrosia taste like to this person? If this person saw Aphrodite, who would Aphrodite look like? What is their relationship like to their godly parent? What is their relationship like to their mortal parent? What is their favorite activity at camp? Have they ever been in love before? What is their greatest fear? Their best memory? Stuff like that. You get little... if they start answering these questions, you'll be able to help them build their character and also have them be really attached to the world that you're building. On that, give your players stuff they have to build. If they are from a town, tell them, okay, cool, I need you to tell me about this town. What is their main export? Who's the mayor? What do they contribute? Because then they'll be able to build this little town for themselves. Think Whitestone with Taliesin Jaffe. Taliesin cares so strongly about Whitestone because he built it himself along with Matt. And you see when he plays in Whitestone, he is fully attentive and is fully there because that's his baby. If you do that with your players, they are going to care so much more about what's happening because they have a stake in the game. Also, if you give them a heavily established backstory, most of the time it gives them something tangible that they have to leave behind in order to go adventuring. If they put a lot of effort into laying down who their family is, who their best friends were back home, what this town is, it means that they have something that they are sacrificing and also something that they can talk about. Another thing that I recommend doing if you have time, especially if you're doing an actual play, is to do off-stream one-shots. Obviously, this is something that not everyone's going to have access to. I especially recommend it if you're doing long-running campaigns. Essentially what that is you will split up the party into maybe 2 people. You could even do it one-on-one, and you run really short one-shots with them. What this is going to achieve is to help the player find that character's voice, give them a tangible connection to another player character, and also help them play with their character sheet a little bit, test it out in combat, and learn some of the skills, especially if they're playing a class that they haven't played before. That means when you actually go into an actual play and start going into combat, they know what the sheet does because they've done it before, which helps it become a much cleaner product. Obviously, not everyone's going to be able to do this because of times, because of scheduling. If it's a turnaround or you're just doing it with your friends, it might not matter as much. But definitely, if you're able to, I couldn't recommend it more. It also helped me see what parts of the world were working and wasn't working and let the players break it a little bit so I could develop it more, because it doesn't matter, it's not recorded. Well, I recorded our one-shots, we posted them on our Patreon, but don't worry about it. That meant when we started session 1, everyone had someone that they could talk to, something that they could talk about and make little references to. They're not overt references so that the audience has no idea what they're talking about. It often means that you can have a really cool show don't tell thing in your first session. People don't need to describe exactly how they're feeling, because most of the time at least one other player at the table knows the kind of personality that they have and knows the question that they can ask, or discussions they can have, or actions they can take to start revealing the personality of the other person or hinting to the personality of other NPCs without implicitly describing it. An example I like to give in my campaign, which I was really proud of, is I had Tessa and Monique, which was 2 characters, have their one-shot together with another NPC called Sasha. And it meant that when the 2 of them had their prophecy dream, They woke up, saw Sasha, and the two of them immediately went, "Oh, what are you up to this time?" They didn't necessarily know that from just reading a sheet or me telling them about this NPC. They now know this NPC to be someone who causes shit, but they were able to show, not tell that to the audience, which I think just makes it a lot more like professional and cool. Look, I just like I made it myself. Don't rush character introductions. When I start off, I like splitting them all up and doing them one at a time, so they have time to not get trampled on by the other players, especially if people who are really enthusiastic and really want to get into roleplaying. You can take a moment to bring them all by themselves and let them be introduced to the other players or to the audience. Most of the time, I'll have them all wake up and I'll ask them to react to something different that is happening to them. Tell me what they look like, how they're reacting to the certain scenario. That means the audience gets to hear what they look like. They also get to hear them speak for the first time and get a little hint into their personality. For example, Tessa woke up to Sasha banging loudly at her door, screaming at her in French. She got to wake up, describe what she looks like, describe what the room looks like, and then immediately start yelling at him back, showing how they have a kind of banter between the two, and he isn't actually mad at her, they're close friends. No other players have the opportunity to interrupt or go in, it's all just on her, which means that they get to get introduced in a much cleaner and nicer way. I build every single one of my character arts based on my players' backstories, because I know that that is something they're immediately going to care about, because goddammit, they came up with it themselves. If someone gives me a character that, say, for example, has a sister who left because she hated camp, Ash, I immediately know that I'm taking that sister and I'm going to make her one of the bad guys. That means immediately both B as the player and the rest of the party are going to immediately clock in on this being something serious but also personal, always relating it back to the story at hand and the characters we are with. They aren't just random figures who are playing along in your world, they are intrinsically important, connected, and influencing this world and story. Otherwise, they wouldn't be here. Just take the time to individually talk to each of your players, ask what they want from this game, ask them what parts of their backstory really interest them the most. Who do they want to talk to? What are they hoping to see? Sometimes you get players who are like, I want you to traumatize me so bad. I want you to use everything I've ever said to you against me. Other players don't give you much because they just want to live in the moment and react along with everyone else. That means that you can cater to each one of those players' needs and build your story around it. When it comes to prepping your actual notes, I always recommend that you spend a lot of time beforehand making sure that you know NPC names, town names, what's in them, what these people are like, what is happening in the world. Generally, as long as you have a really general understanding of what is currently going on in your world, who and what is in it, most of the time you have enough prep to improv the rest. It means no matter what the players throw at you, you know what is existing in your periphery and you know what's going to affect them if they make certain decisions. For example, my players randomly decided they wanted to go to a completely different country. Luckily, I knew exactly what was happening in that country at that time, so they could just arrive and I knew exactly what was going on. Of course, I had to come up with some NPCs that lived there, a little bit of lore so they had something to gnaw at, but really, I knew everything that was going on. It also gives your players freedom to challenge you and do whatever they want without feeling guilt that they're going to pull the rug out from under you. You want to be challenged as much as they challenge you. After you've done a really intense session 0 and you've done all of this prep work, you'll find that you have a really cool open communication between you and your players. They feel safe at your table because they know exactly what they're expecting, but they also know that they're going to be surprised. You know that everything in your planning is going to be interesting to them because they've helped build it or they've told you implicitly that it's something that they want to do. You know that they will have the confidence and knowledge about your world that they'll be able to easily roleplay with the rest of their players and come up with really cool stuff. And you'll also have a group of players that genuinely cares about the story that they're telling because they have been making it since day one. Good luck to my beginner DMs and to the other DMs. I hope that you've learnt something, but thank you so much for watching and I'll see you next time. If you want to see more of me, you can see me on Twitch where I still am DMing Dungeons and Demigods every single Thursday. and playing with my amazing group. We upload the VODs here on YouTube if you want to check out the first episode. Otherwise, you can find me on TikTok and Twitter and Instagram. TikTok is definitely my main, where I just make funny videos about Dungeons and Dragons, but definitely subscribe if you want to see more content like this. Ask me any questions in the comments below, or if you yourself have any tips as a DM when you're starting your first campaign, chuck them below. I'd love to see them. I am currently raising money along with Operation Olive Branch for a family that I've adopted from Gaza. I am working with the Shaban family, who currently 2 of the family members are stuck in Egypt. They did manage to make it out, but one of them has a really terrible brain tumor that we are currently raising money in order to help them get a surgery and also for their rent. And the rest of the money we are saving to wait for the borders in Rafah to open so that we can reunite this family. Currently, we've raised over 20 grand, which is incredible. And most of those donations have just been €1 or €2, but they culminate into something big. So please, it'll be the first link in the description. Donate whatever you can. I massively appreciate it. Alrighty, I'll see you next time. Bye!